Okie dokie, I believe we are all the way live. Hello and welcome to my graveyard. I am your host of the evening, the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass, live in color here with you on Grande's Graveyard. And I know it's another Monday random television show ranking stream, but I got new Wi-Fi a few weeks back. Of course, that's why we did Teen Titans season 2 ranked. Fast forward to tonight, we got a new laptop in the Heezy. So brand new laptop. I'm pretty super stoked about it. And I guess tonight I wanted to just try out how the internet was going to go. It so far looks so good. And my biggest concern is the sound because this changed all my sound settings on my microphone. I didn't know that was going to happen. So I'm hoping everything sounds okay. So people can let me know throughout the stream if there's any muffled noises or crunchy or anything like that. Just let me know because this way it will be a lot easier for me to try to make an adjustment over the next couple days before Thursday's show, where we're doing a live Spider-Man retrospective with the horror boy, the legendary horror boy Nate. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be ranking the Twilight Zone season 3 episodes in order. There's a lot of these, so this might be a little bit of a lengthy show, even though it's funny. It's thrown together, and it probably should be a briefer show. But I don't know. Let's see. I sound a little like I'm in the shitter. Really? Do you mean that for real? I hope you're fucking kidding, AJ. I hope you're kidding because this is the only audio setting where it looked like it was okay. So I really hope you're wrong or kidding because this is the best sounding one, at least from the tests that I got. So I could test these out later again too. But for now, we're going to go right into this. We got 37 episodes to go through here and absolutely zero regrets. And then again, if you guys can let me know how my sound is, AJ, I really hope AJ's kidding, but I have a feeling he's not, knowing my luck. So I mean, it is what it is. But all right, we're gonna get into the ranking list. No, without no further ado, a little bit not horrible. Shit, that's not good. I was wanting to hear it sounded great. Um, Damn, I don't know. Should I continue? See, I can't believe it sounds all right. Mateo says it sounds all right. Um, so okay, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna hear it for myself because I'm live on YouTube anyway. If it's really really bad, I'll stop this and we'll just redo it. So let's see. So I want to hear how we sound and. Really really bad. I'll stop this and we'll just redo it. So let's see. So I want to hear. Oh, it's not terrible. All right, we can do this. We can do this. All right, let's do it. So Mateo Ciao Grande. AJ's in the house. We're going to be ranking season 3 of the Twilight Zone. So first up, the season premiere. Now, this is an interesting episode here too. Season 3, episode 1, of course, starring the legendary Charles Bronson. Who, I mean, if you're not a fan of Charles Bronson, not familiar with his work, I mean, watch any of the Death Wish movies. They're all insanely fun movies. Even Part 5, which is shitty, but I even love Death Wishes like 3 and 4, which I believe were done by like Canon Studios back in the day. But this is a weird one. This one basically tells the story of two people, and it's like post-war time. They're basically, it feels like, judging by the episode, they're the last two people on the earth after the Cold War. And she doesn't speak any English. He speaks only English, and they go back and forth with a sort of romance, but at the same time they're trying to kill each other. So this one's a little bit bipolar at times. This one has a really weird vibe to it, because at one point they're trying to kill each other, at one point they're loving each other. It's like a little bit all over the place with its tone. And I like Charles Bronson's performance in it. The woman, I believe Elizabeth Montgomery is her name. She's sort of ass. Granted, she doesn't have much to work with because she doesn't really have a speaking role. So I mean, you can kind of excuse it. But in my opinion, for a season premiere of my all-time favorite show, this is sort of a downer. I'm gonna say 2 is like a D level Twilight Zone episode. And I know, season 3, season 2, around there, that's really when this show peaked, and probably season 1, 2, and 3 are the best. And you're going to see a lot of great episodes on this list, but 2 was just sort of a off to the wrong foot type of deal, unfortunately. It's definitely not really really bad. Okay, I'm going to try. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go through this stream, and we'll do the stream as is because I listened to it. It doesn't sound terrible. um, and I'm going to see if I can't do make any changes. I granted, I don't know. I may be screwed. Like this may be as good as it ever sounds again because I just bought this camera new, just bought this laptop new, so everything is new. The Wi-Fi is new, so I don't know. We're gonna try to trudge through it at least tonight. Master of Fear is here. What's going on, Fear? And we just like that are gonna move into episode 2, season 3. This is the arrival, and it's funny. Like for one of my all-time favorite shows, here's another episode that I'm actually not that high on, and I know that's weird to say, but the arrival. This one basically tells the story of this airplane that arrives in a hangar, and when they go to clear out the airplane, there's nobody on the airplane itself. There's nobody flying the plane, and there's this whole can of worms that's opened about it. About why did this plane land here? Why are there no people? This investigator comes in. He has this big theory that everybody sees different things on this airplane. Like one says that it has a blue interior, one says it has a red interior, brown, etc. Everybody sees different stuff with this airplane that arrives, and it's all about how different people perceive fear and different people perceive these instances of horror. And I get what the episode was going for, but I do feel like the twist in the third act is quite weak. They sort of make it one of those twists where it was all in the guy's head, as opposed to I wish they would have just stuck with the whole, people see different things with fear, and that fear is all in the eye of the beholder. I think that would have been a much smarter route to go here. Unfortunately, they do not. For interesting themes, I can give this one above a fail, but again, it's going to come right in at about a D. I don't really care for the arrival. So season 3, it's funny. It started off really on sort of a down note for me. Um, Let's see. Let's see your face. No, I'm actually sitting on my couch upstairs. I'm in the pitch fucking dark. You couldn't. I don't even think you would be able to see me, other than the Wi-Fi, the internet light here. Dirty Dozen and Once Upon a Time in the West. Charles Bronson was awesome, dude. Charles Bronson is one of the best fucking actors of his time. I absolutely loved him. The guy had a great intensity to him. So it's really cool to see him do a Twilight Zone episode. I just wish they had him in a better one because I don't know. To me, it's like it is nice to watch Charles Bronson because basically he's the only person in the entire episode with dialogue. But there's only so much he can do. It's sort of a dull script. But moving on into the third episode of season 3, it's an all-time series classic. It's arguably the best episode of this entire season, and it is The Shelter. And The Shelter actually features a bunch of great veteran actors as well. Of course, the one I always remember is Jack Albertson, who was Grandpa Joe in the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This one tells the story of a bunch of people. They're having dinner on their street, in the house, and they're all having cake. And the episode opens with them all like kissing butt and all these kind words and different people and different backgrounds and things like this. And all of a sudden you hear on the radio that there's a bomb threat, and they believe that tonight's the night the end of the world is going to come. And they all evacuate this guy's house, and they all start boarding up trying to protect themselves. But the lead character, he has this shelter that he's going to save his family in, while the other people, they don't. They only have a basement. They only can pretty much hide under their desks, for lack of a better term. And this is an interesting episode in and of the fact that it's a big take off of the monsters who do on Maple Street. And the reason I like it slightly more though is because this episode is completely non science fiction. This episode is one of the few episodes of the entire series that doesn't have a fantasy arc or reality changing thing to it. This is something that completely could happen because it's a bomb threat. And, this episode, it's interesting to see how our characters go from in the beginning and how they're all loving and caring and respectful of one another to the middle where the lead won't let these people all into his shelter because there's simply not enough room, not enough water, not enough food. And he apologizes to them, but it doesn't matter to them. They become monsters and try to knock down this man's shelter just to get in. And they end up taking this giant bulldozer. They knock down the door, and then they hear all on the radio that the bomb scare was just a satellite. And the lead character, he's just mortified. He's horrified by this. And I love the final shot of this episode as he walks out and he's walking up the steps, and Jack Albertson says, "Hey, we'll pay for the damages, Bill. Don't worry about it." And he turns around, he says, "Damages?" He goes, I don't think any of us know the extent of what those damages truly are. We were spared a bomb tonight, but I wonder if we weren't even destroyed even without it." And that scene, that dialogue, to me, that's Twilight Zone 101. It's not even about the bomb scare. That really wasn't the true horror. The true horror of this episode was these people with baby faces at the beginning turning, and you see how all these ugly things can come out when the situation itself is ugly. Of course, prejudice is a big thing that comes out. Sexism is a big thing that comes out. Misogyny, all of these things, because nothing matters more to these friends than their own respective families. And that's why I love The Shelter. I think it's an all-time series classic masterpiece. That's going to be the first episode here to garner the S ranking because I really, really enjoy this one. Acting all around, it's just absolutely incredible. I really, really dig The Shelter. One of my favorite season 3 episodes. Definitely going to be in the running for my favorite of this particular season. But coming up next, it's season 3, episode 4. This is The Passerby. Now, I recently watched this episode again, actually over the weekend, and it's funny. Like I go back and watch the show through. I mean, a lot. I mean, I've seen this show all the way through more than once. It's my favorite all-time show, and in my opinion, for good reason. Of course, The Passerby tells the story about these people coming home from the Civil War in the South, and our lead, he stumbles across this woman who lives in the middle of nowhere, and he asks her for a drink of water and for a place to rest because he's sick of walking along the road, and she lets him. He basically starts telling her about all the horrors of the war and all these things, and she tells him about her husband who was killed. And one by one, we are introduced to these characters walking along the road that were believed to be dead, and in fact, in front of our characters, look to be all that much alive. And this is a great episode, man. This one's really grown on me over time because when I first saw it, I thought it was quite boring. Because it's mainly a dialogue driven episode, but it really is telling the true horrors of the Civil War in the South. And, even for a person like me who obviously I was born long after the Civil War was over, and long after, I mean, everybody was born long after it. But learning about it in school, it never really affected me hearing the stories as opposed to seeing this particular episode because this is a really effective episode. You enter the psychology of the woman who lost her husband. And she says, "I wonder if that Yankee who killed my husband regrets what he did. I wonder if he can, tuck his kids in at night and not think about, the man that he murdered, the man that I loved, and all of these things." And I think it's a tremendous, look at the psychology and the horrors of, the loss of someone in a war and the loss of something that in essence was us versus us, North versus South, America versus America. And it's sad that all of these casualties, you know, uh, happened in turn. And I think this is a really good episode. There's some good music in it. There's this song that our lead is singing and playing the guitar. It's really good stuff. And of course, the ending of this episode, one of the great Twilight Zone endings to me, as our lead woman, she sees her husband on this road and she's in denial about him being dead. And he says, "I'll meet you up the road. You're going to be there soon too." And our lead is she's crying and all these things, and all of a sudden Abraham fucking Lincoln shows up behind her and grabs her arm, and he's just like, "I was the last casualty of the Civil War." And they start walking up the road, and man, it's just one of my absolutely favorite Twilight Zone endings. Just the actor they got to play Abe Lincoln, like it looks exactly like him. It's fucking hard. Like when I first watched it, I was like, "Yo, they resurrected Abe Lincoln 100 years later just to fucking have him be in this episode." Like it's that incredible of a lookalike, in my opinion. And The Passerby, in my opinion, this is a damn good Twilight Zone episode. Not quite S tier, but a very high A. And I'll tell you this: in past years, it probably would have been down here in the C level. But over time, this is one of few episodes that grow on me a lot. And every time I watch it, I kind of dig it a little bit more. But that is The Passerby, season 3, episode 4. Couple comments here. Slasher Fred's in the house. What's going on, Fred? A lot of famous people have guest starred, also worked on other shows, like two had starred. Yes, Elizabeth Montgomery, I mentioned that. And also Charles Bronson, who's, one of the all time great action stars. Saw only 2 episodes of the season. Nothing in the Dark, Death's Head Revisited, and I thought they were great. Dude, those are 2 fantastic episodes. Mateo, I bet you that you were there. But I did an episode in late December talking about my top underrated Twilight Zone episodes with good brother Will, the doctor of cabinet. No, Jesus Christ, the cabinet of Dr. Howdy. Jeez, if I could speak right. And we did mention that was the number one most underrated Twilight Zone episode. So I'm glad you dig that one. Death's Head Revisited is a reference to the classic holiday. Yeah, that is probably the darkest episode of this entire series. I would go that far. I think it's that fucking dark, and we'll get there. But first, season 3, episode 5, A Game of Pool. A Game of Pool. Now, this episode is definitely another top tier Twilight Zone episode. Of course, it stars Jack Klugman as this, loan shark pool player who is the best on Randolph Street. And he dreams nothing more than to be the greatest pool player of all time. The only problem with that is the greatest pool player of all time, Fats Brown, has since passed away. And of course, Fats Brown, played by Jonathan Winters in this episode, Jack Klugman actually summons him from limbo or heaven or wherever Jonathan Winters is at and challenges him to a game of pool. The stakes, if Jack Klugman wins, he gets to live. If Jack Klugman loses, Jack Klugman dies. And this is one of my favorite episodes from a dialogue standpoint. Klugman playing the up and comer challenger, Winters playing the calm, cool, and collected champion. And I think that this one just has so much to say about life. Fats Brown talking to Jack Klugman's character, to discussing, that there's more to life than just playing pool, and that he, even though he was fat and didn't look the part, he made love, he swam in the ocean, he, went to places that they never even heard of billiards before. And it doesn't matter to Jack Klugman because he's really sold his entire life out on trying to be the best at something. And in that vein, has to learn the cost of what it means to be the best at something. And I think this is just one of the all-time great episodes. It has such a wonderful intensity to it. Jack Klugman, I know a lot of people call him an overactor, whether it be Quincy MD or The Odd Couple, or I mean, the guy did so many great television shows, and he was on a lot of Twilight Zones. I believe 4 episodes of the Twilight Zone. I adore him, and I think his performance in this episode is tremendous. But I gotta say, it's stolen by Jonathan Winters because people don't remember. Well, I mean, I guess people do remember, but Jonathan Winters was not really a serious actor. Like, he was more of a comedic guy. And cool enough, if you have the Blu-ray of this, you can watch this with the commentary with Jonathan Winters on it. And his commentary is tremendous because he said, man, he was like, this is one of the only serious things I ever got to do. He says, as a comedic actor, like, that's all you're ever offered. So to be offered this sort of grim champion from the past who's trying to slowly but surely convince Jack Klugman that it isn't worth it. It's a really great performance from Jack Klugman. I think I'm sorry, Jonathan Winters. Jonathan Winters does a great job. He steals this episode, in my humble opinion. I think he's just tremendous. He's dark, and I love, if you look closely, especially on the Blu-ray, you can see he's sweating bullets throughout the entire game, and it just adds another layer on how strong that this episode is. A Game of Pool, to me, an absolute S tier Twilight Zone episode. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I love everything about it. 2 great actors playing a game of pool for the stakes of life and death. I know a lot of people do not care for the twist ending in this. I personally love it, and I know they remade it with a different twist ending, and people seem to like that ending better. Of course, with the '80s Twilight Zone, I prefer this ending though. I think they made the right call here. Some people will probably disagree. Most people will probably disagree, but I absolutely love A Game of Pool. Let's see. Game of Pool is sort of predates The Hustler, which starred Jackie Gleason, who was probably known for his role Ralph. Well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this had to be 1962, or 1961. And I believe The Hustler was 1961. So it may have came out the same year, weirdly enough. I don't know the release dates, but it's got to be around the same time. Probably being filmed around the same time, which is interesting. Fats Brown, of course, the character was based off Minnesota Fats, who was the real great pool player. And then, of course, they took the Fats and just added Brown instead of Minnesota. But a Jonathan Winters in this episode is just it's just sensational. Um, let's see here. Mirth. Yeah, no, Mirth, of course, from Mork and Mindy. The Arrival kind of predates Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and in one of the classic opening scenes, these planes appear out of nowhere. The Arrival, man, I could never get into The Arrival. I don't know, not my cup of tea. But the next one, talking about great actors, this is The Mirror, season 3, episode 6, of course, starring the late great Peter Falk. Of course, everybody, including my father, is a huge fan of this show. Columbo and Peter Falk's in a bunch of great movies. Of course, Robin and the Seven Hoods, and I mean the guy just everything he was in just turned to gold. And this is an episode that a lot of people fucking hate. Of course, this is a more political episode of the Twilight Zone, and in essence, people that know me know I hate politics. But you'd be surprised because this episode I quite like. Of course, it's trying to basically be the Fidel Castro episode of the Twilight Zone, and how paranoia when you're in a position of power can make you do crazy things. And of course, I think it's a little bit preachy in that respect. I think that's why people don't like it. But in my opinion, it's Peter Falk's performance and the elements of horror here that really drive this episode over the top. Of course, he's Ramos Clemente. That's the character's name, and he's taken over his country, and he wants what the people want. He has some great lines in this. What makes a man drunk? Is it the wine, or is it that mob chanting his name? Somebody tell me. I mean, Peter Falk is just tremendous in this, but he speaks to a man that he sentences to death, and the man tells him he will see the faces of his assassins in this mirror that's in this office. And basically, one by one, all of his right hand man, they start to be showing up in this mirror, and he's imagining that they're trying to kill him. And even though none of them are corrupt, none of them are, it's the fear and paranoia of being leader and being taken out in that position that ultimately commits Ramos Clemente to just becoming an absolute mass murderer. I enjoy that theme. I know a lot of people that fucking hate this and say it's like one of the worst Twilight Zone episodes. I think it's done right because, okay, number one, if there's anybody that hates politics, it's me. But to me, it's done right here because it's adding the elements of true horror, right? Because if you're in a position of power, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder. You're always going to be weary of who's just behind your back. And there's the old saying, watch your enemies close, but watch your friends closer. And in this episode, Ramos Clemente starts going crazy. And I love Peter Falk's performance. I think he's just a tremendous actor. He really was one of the best of his time. And I really think this is a decent Twilight Zone episode. Not an A, but I'm gonna say a strong B plus. That's probably higher than anybody would fucking have it that's seen it, because a lot of people absolutely despise this episode. I don't know. I'm just not one of them. I think The Mirror is quite underrated. Um, let's see. Miss C's in the Heezy. Miss C, what's going on? Welcome to the Graveyard Impromptu Stream. How do I sound? Let me know. I'm listening. I'm trying to hear everybody's opinion on how I sound, because this is probably going to be the audio from now on, unless I can try to change the drive here. But I honestly don't know how to do that. So we're going to see with that. But moving on into the next episode here. This is season 3, episode 7's effort. This is The Grave, of course, starring Lee Marvin, who another really great actor. I mean, it's funny. You go through all these episodes, you see so many fantastic actors and character actors. I mean, one after another. It's tremendous how good of people they got to be on this show. Everybody remembers William Shatner, everybody remembers Burgess Meredith, but I always remember Lee Marvin as well. Of course, Lee Marvin in this episode, and Lee Marvin in a great little episode from season 5 called Steel, which they actually adapted into a live action movie with Hugh Jackman called Real Steel. I love Lee Marvin. And I'll be honest, of the 2 Lee Marvin episodes, probably most people tell you this is the better one. I probably prefer Steel. The Grave, I've always been iffy on this one. It's more of like a Western horror episode. I don't know, man. I think Okay, so given the setup here, this one basically stars Lee Marvin, and basically in the opening act, these people take shots at this guy who's wanted, and like 8 or 9 of them shoot at him. Only one bullet hit him, but nobody knows whose shot actually killed the guy. Then there's this whole scene in a bar that, in my opinion, went on a little bit too long for a 25-minute episode. It's just a little bit lengthy in the bar. And this woman says, "Hey, if you go to his grave and plunge a knife in it, we'll know that you're not a coward," and all these things. And it's like almost like a folk horror tale, if you will. And it's I don't know. I think this one's slightly overrated. It has a decent atmosphere. Lee Marvin does a good job, but it's one of those Twilight Zone episodes that just doesn't hit home as much for me as it does for others. To me, The Grave is going to come right around the average mark of a C. It's probably in some people's eyes a great episode. It's just, in my opinion, slightly overrated. I don't know. I don't gravitate towards this one as much. But that's just my opinion. It's not definitely not a bad episode. It's just one that I don't grab or go to as much. That's just my thing. Ben O'Brien sounds just fine to me. Thank you, Mr. Ben O'Brien, and welcome to the graveyard. I don't know if I've ever seen you comment on here, man. Welcome. If you haven't already, please subscribe, man. We're counting down to 500. When we get there, double giveaway. I promise. Sounds good to me. Excellent. Okay. The Grave is inspired by an old urban tale about a girl who dies after spending the night at the cemetery. And I believe Slasher Fred, it's also in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, where she, plunges the knife into the ground and she accidentally hits her dress. And when she turns, she believes someone's hand is reaching out of the grave to get her. And she dies of fright. I love that. I love that story. But here, I don't know. I didn't think this was one of the better Twilight Zone episodes. But coming up next, I mean, this is one of the great Twilight Zone episodes of all time. It is season 3, episodes 8. It's a Good Life. Yes, starring, of course, Billy Mooney, who's, again, another child actor that was in quite a few Twilight Zone episodes, whether it be Long Distance Call or whether it be, I believe he was in Praise of Pip, also with Jack Klugman, funny enough. This is horror done right, in my humble opinion. It basically tells the story of Mr. Anthony Fremont. And Anthony Fremont is this little kid, and he's, in this small town. And weirdly, throughout this episode, you see how all of these people are just overly nice to him. And they're in fear of him because Anthony has this ability to turn people into whatever he wants or send you wherever he wants. He's basically this unstoppable monster that can make all of things happen just with his mind and thinking about him. And the whole mentality of this episode is you better keep thinking good thoughts, because if you're thinking bad thoughts, he'll know it and he'll banish you from this city and kill you. To me, horror done right. And the best part about this episode is the performances from the adults. The adults are all just in absolute utter horror of Billy Mooney in this episode. And he is scary, but their performances are so damn smart. I mean, so damn good. As they're all, "Oh, it's snowing. You'll kill half the crops, Anthony." But it's real good. You're making it snow, Anthony. It's real good. And the one guy, how this whole scene escalates. It's his birthday, and he wants to drink this cherry brandy, and I can't listen to Perry Como on my birthday, and all these things. And it sort of culminates into him getting turned into a Jack in the Box. The whole tension of that scene, you are on the edge of your seat. I mean, it's tension, horror, drama. It's done all so well here. To me, It's a Good Life is one of the great episodes of the Twilight Zone. Another S tier from season 3. Just a great episode. One that I always go back and rewatch. In my opinion, horror done right. Slasher Fred, you're bad, man. You're a very bad man. Dude, amazing. I mean, Anthony Fremont is one of the most scary characters of the series. I came in so late, not sure if it's been covered, but I saw the Christmas episode with Art Carney. So surreal. I covered that actually, Miss C, on my Christmas horror TV special. So if you did not catch that episode, I did cover that one on there. That's season 2. So we won't be covering that one tonight, but it is a good episode. Billy Mooney later became known for his role as Will Robinson on the series Lost in Space, which had starred Veronica Cartwright's sister, Angela, who appeared in this episode, I Sing the Body Electric. Very cool. Ben Grimm, my favorite show. Dude, my favorite show too, without a shadow of a doubt. My favorite show of all time. I absolutely adore The Twilight Zone. So moving on, though, here into season 3, episode 9. This is Death's Head Revisited. Yes, Death's Head Revisited. Um, Another just absolutely fantastic episode, and we covered this one deep on our top 5 underrated Twilight Zone episodes that we recorded back in December. This was number 1 on that list, I believe. Death's Head Revisited is just a tremendous episode. Basically stars this guy who he used to be a concentration camp counselor, and he was at this camp of Dachau, and he comes back sickly enough to relive the glory days of the days where he would torture Jewish people in the Holocaust. I know, really sick setup, and something that I dare say, I don't think you could do this episode today. I don't think it would fly by the ratings as it did. But with that being said, I think this is a tremendous episode on many different levels. Number one, again, it's horror done right. You're taking a very horrific thing in the Holocaust, and adding that Twilight Zone spin to it with the science fiction elements of this guy coming back to relive the glory days and actually coming across some of the people he murdered, mutilated, and gassed. Very impactful with the horror element of this episode. I think the lead guy that's taunting him and you're on trial, and it's really scary stuff. I think that guy does an excellent job. And they sell the fear really good in this episode. And there's points where you feel the bullets hitting this guy. You can feel his pain, and almost you can feel the sweat. I mean, it's just a really raw, gritty episode of this show, which it doesn't really go raw and gritty much. This is a series that usually was more about imagination, but this episode is really a true horror episode, as is It's a Good Life, and that's why I really love this episode. To me, it's a really interesting horror episode. But my favorite thing about this episode is probably the finale, where they're, looking at the guy that went there. He's gone crazy, and this one lead guy, this doctor, goes, 2 hours ago he was fine when you dropped him off. 2 hours later he's not. And he looks at the camp and he goes, I will never understand why they let it stand. And Rod Serling's narration comes over and he says, there's an answer to the doctor's question. There's a reason that it stands. It's a reminder of time of when men tried to turn the world into a graveyard. And that's why all the Auschwitzes, Dachau's, they all must stand, because it's a reminder of when mankind turned to their darkest corner. It's a reminder that we cannot do that again. We must learn from the mistakes of our past. And I think it's a really, really great episode of The Twilight Zone. A scary episode, an episode that makes you think, and an episode that will make you truly uncomfortable. I wouldn't say this is an episode for everybody. I think you've got to have some sort of a tough skin to get through this one. Death's Head Revisited, to me, the 4th S tier of the show. Of this season. I really enjoy this episode. I believe that Steven Spielberg was inspired by the show. Sure, absolutely. Okay, excellent, absolutely. Season 3, episode 10. This is The Midnight Sun. This one, of course, tells the story of these two women living in an apartment building. The sun is slowly but surely coming closer and closer to the earth, and it's getting hotter and hotter. This is an interesting episode. I know a lot of people say this is one of the best episodes of the entire season and the series. I don't know if I'd go that far. This is basically just like these two women suffering through the conditions and slowly but surely going crazy. I like this episode, but I think it's a little bit overrated too. I never quite got the appeal of this one as most people. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't think it's like that good. It has, of course, a twist ending that you could probably see coming, but I do think this one does a good job at making you feel the environment around you, and you can almost feel the heat in the room and in the building with them. And they go through all these sorts of exaggerations of, you could fry an egg on the sidewalk, and if you don't have cold water or whatever, you're going to die in a few days. And all these people keep trying to head up north where it's going to be colder. This is a good episode, just not one of my favorites. The Midnight Sun, to me, comes in with a C. It's just one that, again, I don't go back and rewatch it too often. So for me, a little bit of a overrated episode. Coming up next, though, this is an episode that people fucking hate. And honestly, I know I'll probably lose people here. I really like this one too. This is Still Valley. season 3, episode 11. This is a really weird one where, again, it's another war episode where this guy is kind of bumbling around and he stumbles across all of these, like, you know, people that are frozen, and of course it is the opposition in the war that he's in, and none of them are moving, and comes to learn that this person put this spell on them, that all of these people that were a part of this side of the war, they couldn't move. So they're basically just still, and that's hence the title, Still in the Valley. And people really hate this one, but I kind of like adding the black magic element to a war themed episode. I appreciated it. Again, not a big war or politics guy. So adding that black magic literal spell book to this episode really endeared me to it a little bit more than I think the average person. I do really like the ending of this episode too, where Rod Serling comes on and he says, a few days later, after they throw this spell book into the fire, a few days later, the war was won in a little town of the name of Gettysburg. And of course, the Gettysburg Address, and I don't know, I really love that ending narration. This one a little bit underrated for me. A lot of people hate it, but I'm gonna go with a B. Again, these two that have a B, these are both pretty hated episodes. Probably people have them in the F or the D range. Just in my opinion, though, those are solid episodes. I dig them. Long-running cartoon series, The Simpsons have spoofed the Twilight Zone. Sure, The Simpsons have spoofed a lot of stuff. The Jungle now, season 3, episode 12. This is one that you think I'd like a lot more than I do. This is basically a voodoo and atmospheric attempt from the Twilight Zone. And it's about this guy who he takes this thing back from Africa, and he's basically cursed because of doing so. And most of this episode is basically the guy walking home, encountering creepy shit. But in my opinion, I don't know. I don't think it was that well done here. Like, I don't think it was that good of an atmosphere or anything. And the finale, it's like, I don't know, man. I never really cared for the Jungle. I think it's sort of a meh episode of the Twilight Zone. Another D tier one for me. One that I really hardly ever go back and rewatch. Not one of my faves. But coming up next, it's season 3, episode 13's Once Upon a Time, starring the late great Buster Keaton, of course, of the silent film era. A lot of people used to know and love Buster Keaton. He was very, very popular back in the days of the silent film. This is one of my least favorite episodes of the entire show. I really do not care for this episode. It's basically Buster Keaton. It starts off in the silent era. He puts on a time machine helmet and travels ahead in time. And like, it's very fucking weird. Like, it's trying to be funny, but it's very unfunny in my opinion. Maybe for people who enjoy the silent era type of slapstick humor would get into this, but I don't know. I just couldn't. And I usually don't mind slapstick humor. Here, though, it just falls very, very flat for me. Once Upon a Time to me is going to actually be the first F on this list. So that's going to stay in this column here because I just think this is a really wasted effort and usage of a star like Buster Keaton. I get what they were going for. It is, in a way, ambitious, but I think at the end of the day, it's a movie. It's an episode that really sort of swings and misses. It's Once Upon a Time. That's our first F. So now we have at least one in every single column. But coming up next, one of the all-time great Twilight Zone episodes, in my opinion. It's 5 characters in search of an exit. Of course, another one that I can't help but always put over. I'll never forget the first time I watched this, just being in awe the entire time and wondering, what was going to happen at the end. And when I finally got there, I was just so satisfied because I was pleasantly fooled and tricked. But this tells the story of 5 people that wake up in this kind of cylinder. One's a ballerina, one's a bagpiper, one's a hobo, one's a clown, and one's an army major. And one by one, they're discussing, where they are. They're trying to figure out why they're there, who they are, why they don't feel, hunger, why they don't feel thirst, and why they don't feel tired, and all of these things. And they get the great idea that we have to stand on each other's shoulders and climb to the top. And if we get to the top and see where we are, our questions can be answered, and we don't have to listen anymore. And they all have their theories of where they are. One guy thinks they're in hell. One guy thinks they're in limbo, and they all have their own little theories and ideas. But I think what makes this episode fantastic is the twist ending. And spoiler alert for people who haven't seen this, because this is one I have to go in. Like, if I'm going to tell you why I love it, it has to be spoiled. So spoiler alert for those who have not seen this episode. I am going to spoil it. There's one point where the ballerina suggests that they are the unloved, and she's crying when she's saying that, and it's a really powerful scene. And when you get to the finale, that is actually, in fact, the twist ending. They are the unloved. What they basically are toys for, the less fortunate, and they're going to be given to these kids that are less fortunate for the year of Christmas. And they, for right now, are the unloved. Tremendous. I think, in my opinion, it's just a tremendous ending, and it explains everything so well. Of course, why were they all occupations? As I granted that the hobo, nobody's gonna play with a toy hobo. That's the one hole in this episode. Because when I first watched it, like, if somebody suggested, oh, what if the guy, what if they're all toys? Like, wait a minute, what, a toy hobo? But exactly. Like, I don't think anybody would really have that. But I mean, that is what it is. It's neither here nor there. But I don't know. I always really loved this episode. I think it has the right atmosphere, the right amount of tension. To me, it's a damn good Twilight Zone episode. One of my all-time favorites. Another S tier. You got 5 S tier episodes right here. And honestly, I'm pretty sure there's a few more. So I'm excited to keep going here. We're almost halfway through. Let's see. Buster Keaton also appeared in the classic movie Sunset Boulevard. That's true. There was an episode of Soap Opera Felicity that spoofed this episode. Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's interesting. We've had over 50 years to see it. No spoiler alert. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. Some people, they always want the warning beforehand. So I'm trying to play it fair. But yeah, no, I agree. If it's been 50 years, you need to get off the rock you're living under and leave, because that shit's been old and over for a while. But coming up next, season 3, episode 15. This is Equality of Mercy. This one, man, I don't know. Maybe people that are into war and stuff would like this one better than me. I just never really cared for it. Um, this is an episode where it's basically an American soldier, and he's very gung ho about, it's just like World War II time, and he's very gung ho about killing these Japanese soldiers. And basically, there's a whole flip of reversal where he all of a sudden wakes up and he's Japanese, and he's fighting now for the Japanese side. And he sees the horrors of, the way he used to think about mercy and killing people that were innocent, killing an enemy that wasn't afraid to die. And he sort of sees, this is basically an episode where this guy sees the other side of the coin. And it is well done. I think the story they're trying to tell is well done enough. I just This one for me is sort of an episode. Like, I don't hate it, I don't love it, I don't grab to put this one on. I think this series did better with episodes like this. Like, for example, I think The Passerby is a far better look at, a war themed episode as opposed to Equality of Mercy. And you could still get the psychology of what it's like for the other side, even if you're not in their shoes directly. I get what they were going for. It's decent. It's perhaps solid, but in my opinion, it's a little bit average. For Quality of Mercy, in my opinion, is going to be an average episode of The Twilight Zone for me. 5 characters in Search of an Exit stars William Wyndham, who appeared in a lot of movies and later became known on the show Murder, She Wrote as Dr. Seth Hazlitt. That was my grandmother, one of her favorite shows, Murder, She Wrote. Of course, Angela Lansbury, just a fantastic show. Granted, I didn't watch it very much, but she loved it. Whenever I watched it, I'd watch it with her. So I don't know. You mentioned that show, and it made me think of her. Quality of Mercy kind of predates the classic series Quantum Leap. I think mostly because that stars the late Dean Stockwell. Dean Stockwell is fantastic. Good point about spoilers, but there's always a new generation who may or may not discover Twilight Zone. Just saying. Well, that's why I gave them the spoiler alert. I hear you. But and I'm trying not to spoil all of these, but it's tough. And it's honestly, it's a show that it's almost 60 years old now. It's over 60 years old if you count the first season. If you're going from there. And this third season's exactly 60 years old. So, I mean, it is what it is. I don't want to spoil these for anybody, but we're going into these hardcore. Coming up next, it is season 3, episode 16. This is Nothing in the Dark. Yes, Nothing in the Dark, season 3, episode 16. This is one of people's, like, big beloved episodes. A lot of people will tell you this is one of the best episodes of the entire series. It basically tells the story of this old woman who's living in like this really cold, old, dilapidated house, and all of a sudden, this officer, actually played by Robert Redford, shows up at her door, and he's wounded. He says he's been shot, and she's afraid to let him in because she believes that he could be, you know, the death man that is trying to take her away to heaven or hell or limbo or wherever. And she's afraid that he is death itself, and she doesn't want that to happen. She doesn't want to let him in. And a lot of this episode is discussing the fears of death and the fears of this old woman that did not want to be taken, that refused to be taken away. And this does have a very nice performance from Robert Redford in an episode that's primarily about death. It does have a very light-hearted atmosphere to it. It's not too bleak of an episode. It's an episode where you sort of smile towards the end, even though it's not the happiest of endings. It's an ending where you're like, okay, I see why it ended this way, and I see, why she was afraid and doubtful and hesitant and all these things. This one is really reliant on the lead two performers, and they both do a wonderful job. Nothing in the Dark to me is going to be an A tier Twilight Zone episode. Not quite the S that most people would have it at, but I think it's a damn good episode, and people would probably argue it deserves to be an S. For me personally, it's an A. I think it's a strong A. I don't think it's on the level of these ones I have above it, though. That's just my opinion, though. I think it's Nothing in the Dark would appeal to more people, as opposed to a Death's Head Revisited, or even a game of pool, especially people that don't care about pool or want to watch people talking about life and playing pool. But I don't know. In my opinion, I think Nothing in the Dark is a good episode. There was a series I used to watch called Erie, Indiana, that was about this young teen boy who moves to a supposedly peaceful town and experiences these strange occurrences. And in one of the episodes called Reality Takes a Holiday, it pays homage to the episode A World of Difference. Oh, okay, that's cool. So moving on, let's see. Next episode here. This is one I find super underrated. This is One More Paul Bearer. Yes, One More Paul Bearer. This one tells the story of this man who's filthy rich. And at the beginning, he's building this bomb shelter. And it's underground. He's got all these screens set up, and he's basically setting up a big practical joke. He wants to fool these few people that come down into his basement into thinking that the world is going to end that evening. There's going to be a big bomb that goes off, and the people he invites are the three people that he claims ruined his life. Of course, one of them is a teacher that caught him cheating. One of them is a priest that accused him of forcing a woman to commit suicide. And the third is an army general that dishonorably discharged him in the war. But despite those three exposing him for the piece of garbage he is, he wants them to all beg for his forgiveness so they could stay in this bomb shelter with him. So the whole idea is he wants them to apologize to him and fold. And basically the whole thing with this episode is none of them do. All of them kind of stand by their guards and say, we'd rather die than apologize to you because you're, you know, pawn scum, basically. And I always thought this was a really good episode. I love the dialogue in it. At one point, the school teacher says, pretty please with sugar on it. And she says it's what children say when they're begging for something or a favor. And she says, I'd rather spend my last hours with a stray cat than spend it with you. And at one point he asks the Reverend, is life so stinking cheap? And he goes, there's a few things in life that are more valuable than life itself, and respect and honor is one of them. And these people, out of respect and pride, do not fold to this practical jokester. But then the joke on him is he imagines that the world ends anyway. And he believes himself to be the last man on planet Earth. As this thing ends, he's gone absolutely crazy. A practical joke turned into a nightmare. To me, One More Pallbearer is one of the most underrated episodes of season 3, an A tier episode for me, and one that, again, I know a lot of people. My father hates this one. I've watched this with him quite a bit. He thinks this one is terrible. I don't know. I personally really, really enjoy it. I don't get the hate, but a lot of people apparently don't care for this one. Fun fact, though, I read this not too long ago. Rod Serling said this was one of his most underrated of the entire series as well. So I think that's interesting and worth noting. I enjoy this episode. One more Paul Bearer, one that I highly recommend people give a look. Paul Bearer, oh Undertaker, oh yes, of course the legendary William Moody, Paul Bearer, gotta love him. Moving on though, season 3, episode 18. This is Dead Man's Shoes. Now, this is one they actually sort of remade in the Tales from the Dark Side series, funny enough, and in an episode where it's basically this bum puts on the shoes of this dead gangster and he walks back into his life. It's basically he's given new life in this man's shoes. It's an interesting concept, one that I'm sort of on. It's not an episode I go back too much. I think that's the big drawback for me. It's just not that memorable. It's not bad, but it's not quite that memorable for me. I would say Dead Man's Shoes is another average Twilight Zone episode. Nothing to run home about, but certainly one that you can give a look and decide for yourself. I know actually this guy I work with, Joe, it's his favorite episode of the entire series. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe that's the thing with anthology. Sometimes different people can view different episodes in different ways, and it affects you different way. Like for me, a game of pool says so much about life, and I also love playing billiards. I love the game. So to me it's a really interesting take and look at the psychology of life. But for somebody else, a dead man's shoes could be okay. What would it be like if I walked into somebody else's shoes, if only for a night? That's why I really love this series, and that's why it's fun to do this, because people will agree, people will disagree, but that's why it's fun to do. It's fun to kind of go through all of them. But coming in next, it is The Hunt, another episode we actually featured Will and I on our top underrated Twilight Zone episodes. And The Hunt is a really good one. It tells the story of Hyder Simpson and his dog Rip, and they go hunting for raccoons at nighttime. And basically, Rip jumps into the water to try to kill a raccoon. Hyder goes in for him, and they both drown together. And when they resurface, they don't realize that they have died, and they walk up the road and they see that the wife is burying the dog and the husband, and they realize that they've come to terms with death. They've now died. And it's morbid for a while, but they're walking around these like grassy dirt roads, and all of a sudden they come in contact with what they believe is the gatekeeper to heaven, and this guy will not let the dog in. He's saying, "Come on in, I'll give him to you under the fence. I can't let the dog in." And he's saying any place that's good for Rip is too good for me. No thanks, pal. He walks away, and then later he sees this guy, and he goes, "Oh hi," he's talking to him, and he says, "Hey, did you get past the gates?" And he's like, "Sure, I did. Why?" He goes, "Well, that was hell, and the dog would have warned you. He would have smelled the brimstone coming." And you know, uh, he says this great line in the episode where a man can walk into hell with both eyes open, but not even the devil can fool a dog. I love that. And man's best friend actually saves Hyder Simpson from entering the gates of hell. And instead, at the end, welcome to heaven, Mr. Simpson, and they walk to heaven together. To me, a great episode of the Twilight Zone, one of the more underrated ones, one with a great heart. Any dog lovers out there, you should love this episode. Like to me, this is an episode for any and everyone that loves dogs. The Hunt is just a great episode, a lot of heart to it, and S tier for me. A damn good episode of the Twilight Zone. Coming up next, though, I'm trying to go through these a little quicker, ladies and gents. I'm sorry, I know it's late. I'm going to try to fly through these a little bit quicker now because there's only a couple more. Like we got like 17, 18 more. This is Showdown with Rance McGrew, season 3, episode 20. This one, this is a shitty one in my opinion. I don't really care for this one very much. It's like this is like about this guy who he's a Western TV star, and then he somehow comes across this guy who, he's playing, and the guy keeps threatening to beat the fucking shit out of him if he doesn't play him right or more seriously or whatever. And there's really it. I mean, it's sort of comical. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's not funny. I don't know. Showdown with Rance McGrew is one of my least favorite episodes of the season. It's probably a D minus, but I don't care for it at all. For now, it's going to be an F. And maybe I'll change my mind, but for now, Showdown with Rance McGrew is an F for me. I don't really care for this episode. I think it's sort of sort of shitty, and it's one that nobody talks about, probably for good reason. It's not one that's considered one of the worst, but it's one that's never mentioned even among average. So to me, it is one of the worst. Um, but up next, it's season 3, episode 21. This is Kick the Can. Now, Kick the Can was actually remade in the Twilight Zone movie. This was the Steven Spielberg segment, of course, talking about the elderly people in the retirement home. And of course, one by one, they all trying to relive their youths. And especially this lead guy, he wants to be a kid again. And he feels the only way to be a kid again is to act like a kid again. And of course, towards the end of this episode, they're playing Kick the Can. All these elderly people all of a sudden turn young again. And his one buddy who was doubting him the whole time, he sees it all unfold and he's, oh my God, take me with you. And they don't. Um, and I like the whole, exit narration, you won't find them. They're gone. Like they're kids again now. It's a good one. I don't think it's as great as a lot of people do. Like, I don't know if it's one of my favorites. I think it's a little bit above average though. For me, Kick the Can's going to come in with a B level for me. Definitely a solid one though. Moving on here though into season 3, episode 22. This is A Piano in the House. Now, this is a really cool one in my opinion, and one that a lot of people do not talk about. I think it deserves to be talked about more. This one tells the story of this guy. He buys this piano for his wife, and it's for her birthday. And basically, if you play a piece of music on the piano can play itself. If you play a certain piece of music, it'll make somebody in the room admit their, deepest, darkest secrets about themselves. And this guy, the whole episode, he's doing it sort of to expose people. And, this thing plays out and these people are being exposed. Of course, the wife is cheating on him. He does it to expose this overweight woman, which is really mean. He just does it out of the sadistic pleasure of being mean. And it's in poor taste, but of course, the end of this episode in Twilight Zone fashion, the tables are turned on him, and they play a piece of music that makes him go crazy, and it shows how much of a coward this guy truly is. I think it's really well acted. I really enjoy the musical pieces in this, and in my opinion, it's a classic Twilight Zone episode that a lot of people need to talk about more. In my opinion, this is an A tier episode of the Twilight Zone. One of the more underrated ones for me of this season, one that I think more people need to see. Um, of course, coming up next, season 3, episode 23. This is The Last Rites of Jeff Myrtlebank. This is one of the most Tales from the Dark Side episodes. Like, this is, if you watch this episode, it feels more like a Tales from the Dark Side episode than a Twilight Zone. This one tells the story of this guy who he is dead and almost buried. He's in his coffin, and these people are mourning his death. And of course, the day of his mass, he gets out of the coffin in front of everybody, and he's alive, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, like what the hell? You were dead." And the whole episode is basically him trying to convince people that he is not dead and he is alive and well. And people notice that he's a little bit different, even though he's back. And this one, I can never really decide how I feel on this one. Like, to me, it's a middle of the road episode. It's either a C plus or a B minus. Um, for now, it's probably a C plus. I think it's a little bit above average, but not like a little bit above a C, but I don't know how much above a C. Like I enjoy it, but I think it's a little bit ahead of its time, this episode, and not in the best of way. I think this would have been done maybe a little bit better in the 80s as opposed to how it was done here in the early 60s. I think maybe a more 70s, 80s spin on this would have made this thing a little bit better. I don't know. That's just my opinion. A lot of people probably disagree, probably don't even know what I'm talking about with that. But I don't know. For me, average episode, like a C plus. Coming up next, though, one of people's all-time favorite episodes, my dad's personal favorite episode. This is To Serve Man. Yes, To Serve Man, season 3, episode 24. This one is about, of course, these aliens that come from outer space, the Canaanites, if you will. They're played by the guy who plays Jaws, of course, in the James Bond films. For some reason, his name escapes me. If anybody wants to comment his name, feel free. He comes to Earth, and they have this book, and it's titled To Serve Man, and they want to take care of man and take them back, treat them to their home planet, stuff like that. And This whole episode sort of plays up as this big lead up to a twist ending where, of course, the name of the book isn't exactly going to uh, be about serving man in the way that man thinks. And of course, this is the classic line. It's a cookbook. Yes, it's a cookbook. Yes, one of the best twist endings of the series. Of course, you go from being the top of the food chain to an ingredient in somebody's soup. Just absolutely fantastic psychology, in my opinion. To serve man has to be an S tier for me. So we broke this the scale now. Now it's everything's uneven and shit like that. So I'm sorry, but this is a great episode. It has to be an S tier. One of the best of the series for sure. Coming in next, though, this is The Fugitive. The Fugitive, season 3, episode 25. This is a weird one. This one's basically about this guy who he takes the shape of an elderly man, but he's secretly an alien and he's a fugitive from like the intergalactic police. And he befriends this like small girl who they're buddies and they're playing, games together, stuff like that. And like, I don't know, I always found this one a little fucking weird. Like, the whole vibe of this guy chilling with, this girl who's like underage. I just thought it was a little odd. But they try at the end, like retcon it and just try to say that he's a kid too, even though he's an elderly man's body. I don't know. This episode's fucking weird to me. Not good, not bad, sort of just middle of the road. I would say like a C minus. That the fugitive is sort of one I try to skip. It tries to have a heart, and I guess some people would like it, but I don't know. I'm just not one of those people. I didn't really think this one was all that. Not a bad one, but not a great one either. Okay, let's see. So for some reason, season 3, episode 26, I see is not on here. That is Little Girl Lost. That would probably fall around the C level for me too. Again, an episode that inspired a lot. Like I would say Poltergeist was very inspired by Little Girl Lost. If you haven't seen Little Girl Lost, you know what I mean. If you do watch it now. But in my opinion, Little Girl Lost, another like C level episode. But coming up next, it is Person or Persons Unknown. Of course, Mr. David Gurney. I always remember that. This episode tells the story of this guy. He wakes up and he basically, nobody knows who he is. He's lost his identity, and all of these people do not recognize him for who he is. And I really like this one. I think it's really well acted. I believe Richard Long is the actor in this. He went on to be in, of course, season five's episode number 12 looks just like you, another really good one. Person or Persons Unknown is solid. I don't really know if I care for the ending, but it's one of those like up until the ending I really really like it, and then the ending, the last 5 minutes, like I guess they just didn't know how to end it. It was one of those like kind of cop out endings, but to me it's like a B level episode of the Twilight Zone. I like Person or Persons Unknown. But coming in next, this might be the most underrated episode of the entire series, and one that I really wish I had mentioned on that episode I did with Jeff. I'm not Jeff. I'm sorry, Will. The episode I did with him, because this is a damn good episode. This is The Little People. Yes, The Little People, season 3, episode 28. This one has the legendary Joe Morose and Claude Atkins as the leads, as these two astronauts who crash land on a planet, and they find and discover this race of little people that are no bigger than ants. And Joe Morose is, he has the classic Napoleon complex of, being the little guy or always being the sidekick. And he doesn't like to take orders from Claude Atkins, of course. And he sees this opportunity to, torture these poor little people that cannot help themselves. And he is just so evil and malicious in this episode, but he's also very fun and over the top. And now I know a lot of people probably wouldn't care for the performance, but I think Joe Morose does a great job, and Claude Atkins is the straight man of the two. What do you give them in return, Craig? Like, why don't you think about what you're doing, Craig? And would you just reason this out with me, buddy? And the two of them going back and forth is it's really fantastic acting. It's right up there with a game of pool for some of the best mono y mono acting in the entire series. And I love the whole mentality of Rod Serling closing narration. As of course we see our lead, he gets crushed by giants because to these little people he's a giant, but to giants, of course, the normal sized guy is a little person. He gets crushed and thrown down to the ground, and Rod Serling, probably my favorite closing narration of all time. He says, in this case, the man dies a little bit. I'm sorry, the man dies a little bit harder than I'm a little bit harder than the. I'm sorry, ladies and gents, I've been interrupted here. If I can, he says the dream dies a little bit harder than the man. That's the line of this episode. And I really really love it. It's a really damn good one. To me, it's another S tier. It's another damn good episode of the Twilight Zone. I really dig this one. Um, but let's see. There was an episode of the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer where this trio of nerdy antagonists make Buffy believe that she's in a mental asylum and all things she has experienced are just dot dot dot. Okay, leaving us in suspense here. Um, Coming up next, though, let's see. Okay, coming up next, it is season 3, episode 29. This is 4 o'clock. Another episode that people seem to really hate. I don't hate it. This stars Theodore Bickel as this kind of crazy conspiracy theory guy who is sort of like, I don't know, he wants to attack all of these people that aren't necessarily evil. And he comes up with this great plan, at least in his eyes, a great plan to at 4 o'clock make all the evil in the world turn 2 feet tall. And that's the mentality of this episode for this lead heel character. And I think he gives a good performance. And I don't know. I thoroughly enjoy his performance in this, but I don't know. It's one of those things where it's one of those episodes that people don't really like. Maybe it's I like the twist ending and I think his performance is good enough. It is a boring episode aside from that. Like it is more or less just this guy sitting in there complaining about people. So I mean, it is what it is. I mean, some people aren't going to like that, but it is what it is. I don't know. For me, it's another average Twilight Zone episode, another C level. We've broken the C column now, ladies and gents. A lot of C, a lot of S. It's funny. But I guess we're at episode 30. Okay, so we only got like 7 more of these to go. This is season 3, episode 30, Hocus Pocus and Frisbee. Yes, I love this one. Really cool little take on the boy who cried wolf. Of course, it follows our lead character, Frisbee, and he's this guy. He claims to know everything, and he's just this real loudmouth guy and I really like him. He's a fun actor. This character does a really good job in this role, and he basically is always lying about, oh, I went to Harvard, I accomplished this, I accomplished that, blah blah blah. But in reality, he's just sort of a fat, lazy store owner that has taller tales than there is anything else about him. But I think this episode is really solid because eventually he gets abducted by aliens and he has to play the harmonica to try to get them away. And they let him go. And when he goes back to the town to tell everybody, of course, they don't believe him because he's the boy who cried wolf. It's an interesting kind of take on the boy who cried wolf. I really enjoy this episode. Hocus Pocus and Frisbee is going to be an A tier episode of The Twilight Zone for me. I really enjoy that one. It's fun. It has humor. It has cool alien design in it. Good creepy acting. And honestly, a tale that I think is still prevalent today. I think it's something that people could, that do lie a lot, could learn a little bit from. Um, Coming up next, though, season 3, episode 31. This is the trade-ins. This is, of course, the classic story of the old couple that want to trade their old bodies in for new ones. This one was a little bit ahead of its time, I would say. And of course, they can only afford one body. The old man claims he will win double the money in cards. That doesn't really go well. He trades his body in, but he realizes that it's probably best for he and his wife to just grow old and die together. This one, I think it's sweet. It's not one of my favorites, but it's probably a little bit above average. The trade-ins would go at the B level for me. I like the trade-ins. Not one of my favorites, but one that I would say is a little bit above average. Probably, maybe if when I'm older, I'll appreciate it a little bit more. But coming up next, season 3, episode 32. This is the gift. Show them the gift. This one, this one hasn't aged the greatest for me because it's a little bit like, why didn't he just tell them before? But I guess that's the whole point. This tells the story of this Mexican village, and this intruder comes there. They all believe he's dangerous, but he claims that he has a gift. And once he shows them the gift, they'll all forgive him and forgive him not being, one of them. And of course, he's trying to convince them of that. And it's all an episode about prejudice and how we should not turn our way to outsiders just because. And of course, this one ends where they kill him, but the gift was he knew the cure for cancer. and they kill him before he can get all of it out. I mean, I appreciate it. It's a decently done episode. It's just not one of my all-time favorites. Like to me, it's a little bit pretentious. It's a little bit preachy. Not terrible, but not great either. To me, it's another average episode. The Gift, the sea level episode here. Oh man, but coming up next though, this has got to be one of the scariest episodes of the whole fucking series. This is season 3, episode 33. This is Cliff Robertson in The Dummy. Yes, The Dummy. One of the best horror themed episodes, of course, talking about this ventriloquist who believes his doll Willie is alive and trying to kill him. I really like this episode. I think it's just very fucking scary, really creepily done. The voice actor playing the dummy Willie is just terrifying. Cliff Robertson does a great job as this guy who's struggling with all of these things, and I don't know. I enjoy Cliff Robertson's performance in this. I think he does a really really good job as the lead here, and I think that for what it's worth, this is one of Cliff Robertson's best performances. I really think he does a great job in this episode. It's to me another horror episode of this series done right. I love The Dummy, one that I praise a lot. And the twist ending, bro, the facial makeup is horrifying. I love The Dummy. The Dummy is an S tier episode for me. So let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 S tiers. Can we get 10? We've got 4 more shots at it. But season 3, episode 34. This is Young Man's Fancy here. This is an episode I know a lot of people hate. Like it's in the bottom 10 of a lot of people's ranking lists. I don't quite hate this episode. I think this is just an episode that a lot of people wouldn't be able to relate to. I personally, I can't relate to it, but I actually know quite a few people that would be able to. Like I know people that have had, relationships like this. It basically tells a story of this couple, and after the husband's mother dies, they're trying to sell her old house, and he can't bring himself to sell the house because of the love for the mother, and he's slowly but surely reverting back into a child. I kind of dug this episode, but I know a lot of people don't. I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. A lot of people don't like this one. It's not anything great, but it's like an average episode. Young Man's Fancy. Final 3 here. This was the only one I believe written by the late Ray Bradbury, who, of course, very famous writer. It's funny. A lot of people always mention, oh, Ray Bradbury, he wrote a lot of Twilight Zones. No, he only wrote this one. This is the only Twilight Zone Ray Bradbury ever wrote. And it is I Sing the Body Electric, of course, season 3, episode 35. This one tells the story of these kids, and they are given the chance to create this like nanny because their mother's not in the picture anymore, and they create this nanny where they can customize everything about her eyes, her personality, what she says, what she sounds like. It's a very cool idea to have this android nanny that can't be killed, and you can make her look, sound, and feel however you want. It's an interesting idea. It's just not, again, it's not one I go back to much, but for the plot, I think it's got to be above average. To me, I Sing the Body Electric, probably like a solid B for me. Nothing great, but definitely one that I think is a solid B episode. And here we come on to, oh boy, Cavender is Coming. This is the worst episode of the entire season. It's got to be. This is a fucking piece of shit episode with Carol Burnett. And it's funny, they had the idea that this was going to be a pilot for a brand new show starring Carol Burnett. And of course, Carol Burnett would get her own show at one point, which is, fitting enough. And she deserved it. I love Carol Burnett. Who doesn't? But this particular episode, it plays out as basically like It's a Wonderful Life. And this series did a lot of It's a Wonderful Life episodes, whether it be the next episode we're going to talk about, or Mr. Beavis, or there's so many episodes of the Twilight Zone that's like that, like Cherish Your Life episodes. Cavender is Coming, though, has got to be the weakest of all of those. It's very weak. It has a laugh track in it. I don't know. I could never get into this one. It's really bad. To me, it's the worst episode of this entire season. And it's arguably the worst thing Carol Burnett was ever fucking in. Because it's a really, really, really poor episode. To me, one of the worst episodes of the entire series. In my opinion, the worst episode of season 3. Last one here, but we can get into quick comments. I see a couple comments here. The 1998 film Pleasantville kind of mostly has a Twilight Zone feeling. Oh man, I love it. Also has like the Leave It to Beaver feel. That movie, I love Pleasantville. Tobey Maguire and oh my God, Reese Witherspoon, great movie. There was a TV movie I remember watching called The Electric Grandma that was very similar. Yeah, I mean it probably was. That sounds exact. That's like an alternate title almost sounding. How many seasons of the Twilight Zone has? Forgive my ignorance. Oh no, you're not ignorant. No worries. So it was 5 seasons. The first three and the fifth were all half-hour format. Season four was the hour-long format, which a lot of people say it's the worst season. I would agree. I hate season four. I think season four is the worst format, in my opinion. It's the worst season. It has a couple of standouts, but in my opinion, it is the weakest of the seasons. But getting into the final episode here of season three that we're going to be talking about tonight. This is the changing of the guard. Of course, starring the late great Donald Pleasance. Really cool to see Donald Pleasance in a Twilight Zone episode. I really like this one. This one tells the story about this professor who's taught in this. I think it's a college. Forgive me if it's a high school. I think it might be like a senior year of high school thing. And it tells the story of this guy who he's forced to retire because of his old age. It's funny, Donald Pleasance of the recording of this episode wasn't that old, but they made him look very old, and the makeup holds up. And it's funny because like I always picture Donald Pleasance as being older from the Halloween movies, so it works. You totally buy him being an older guy, and they force him to retire, and he contemplates suicide, and he wants to blow his own brains out. And it's not until he goes back to his classroom for one last time before he kills himself at all of the ghosts of the past kids that he's taught over the past 50 years convince him not to kill himself. How all of these kids learn courage and honor and all of these things from him, and how they use them in their lives. And I enjoy this episode. I think it's really well done episode in and of the fact of It's a Wonderful Life. I think it's a really good one. Donald Pleasance does a great job because who doesn't love Donald Pleasance? But I think also it has a good gothic feel to it. Like when all the kids appear in the classroom, it's very eerie, even though they're there to say good things and not attack him. And in fact, they're there to save him. But I don't know. To me, the Changing of the Guard is a very good episode. It's probably going to come in at the A tier here. So this is overall the Twilight Zone season 3 ranked. So we've got 3 Fs, 3 Ds. We've got about 9 C's, 9 S's, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 A's, 6 B's. So wow, that's crazy. We had 2 of everything: 2 3s, 2 9s, 2 6s here. If I had to pick an absolute favorite episode, it's probably either Death's Head Revisited. Wow, this is tough. Of all of these up here, this is really tough. The Shelter's got to be up there. Game of Pool's got to be up there. Probably of the top 3 of this season would be The Shelter, A Game of Pool, and Death's Head Revisited. 5 Characters in Search of an Exit and The Little People would be right behind it, though. All of these great episodes at the top here. I really, really like these. And of course, the 3 I would avoid the most is these 3 at the bottom. Once Upon a Time, Showdown with Ransom McGrew, Cavender's Coming. Those are some poor ones. But yeah, no, I wanted to do this stream impromptu. I appreciate people that joined. Again, I had this new laptop, so I wanted to test out the sound. I see that the connection wasn't the greatest. Granted, I don't know how people, because I wasn't on, the camera. Obviously, I'm recording just audio here, but I saw the connection was sort of iffy too. So this is going to be interesting. I hope this doesn't affect the show in a negative way for future episodes. But I wanted to take this time tonight and sort of record this episode as quickly as possible. Granted, I picked 37 episodes. I picked the longest season to go through, but that's just the way I am. There is an episode called Time Element from the show. Yes, that's true. That was like the unofficial pilot. Donald Pleasance was a great Blofeld in 007. Are you a 007 fan, John Grande? Yes, absolutely. My favorite Bond or favorite Bond movie. I'm trying to think. Man, that's tough. My favorite Bond, honestly, might be Roger Moore, and I know a lot of people fucking probably think I'm crazy for that. But I mean, I like Sean Connery. I really like Daniel Craig. Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan, I feel like the movies should have been better. Like he probably did one of the best, Bond movies, but the other ones are sort of weak. I don't know. And then I would say Timothy Dalton would probably be my least. Although George Lazenby, he probably qualifies. So I don't know. I would probably say Roger Moore is my favorite. Roger Moore, then Daniel Craig, then Connery. That's probably my top 3 Bonds. Donald Pleasant later became known for his role as Sam Loomis as the psychiatrist. Of course, yeah, no, absolutely. But all right, everybody, that was Twilight Zone season 3 ranked. I appreciate everybody who joined. This was a very impromptu show, more to do audio and stuff like that. But we will be back this Thursday live in living color. The Horror Boy is going to be on for that show, so I'm super excited for that. We're going to be talking all things Spider-Man live action movies. So I'm really excited to get into that. I think it's going to be a really fun time talking all the things Spider-Man with Nate. Mateo says I'm a huge Bond expert. Oh, that's awesome, man. I have all of the ones available on VHS in my house. So it's really cool. I have like the whole collection of VHS of course, all of them except the Daniel Craig ones I have because obviously I don't think there are VHS releases. Those ones I have all on Blu-ray or 4K. But yeah, that is going to be all for the show tonight. Again, thank you everybody. I appreciate it. Had a really fun time ranking these with y'all, and I hope the sound and audio and everything worked out fine. I'm going to try to rewatch like 10 minutes of this back so I can see for myself. But that is going to be all for now. This is the Cemetery Man from Salem, Mass. Always taking names and kicking candy ass. Live in living color here with you on Grande's Graveyard. We will catch you Thursday for the Spider-Man retrospective. Too sweet, peace, and we'll catch you next time.